What happens when Chris Pine, known for his calm charm and effortless composure, suddenly finds himself locked in a tense, unpredictable exchange with one of daytime television's most outspoken voices, Joy Behar, live on The View? Before we dive into this explosive moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Stage View, drop a like, and tell us in the comments what you think really happened. Because this one, it's not as simple as it looks. The studio lights burn a little hotter that morning. There's something in the air, something the audience can feel before a single word is spoken. The cameras glide across the polished table, capturing the familiar faces, the practiced smiles, the routine energy that millions tune in for every day. But beneath that routine, there's tension quietly waiting to surface. Chris Pine sits poised, leaning slightly back in his chair, dressed in understated elegance. He's been here before: press tours, interviews, late-night appearances. He knows the rhythm. He knows the dance. But today feels different. Joy Behar, on the other hand, is exactly what viewers expect. Sharp-eyed, unapologetic, already leaning forward with that signature look that signals she's about to say something bold. Something that cuts through the usual promotional fluff. The introduction begins smoothly. Applause fills the room as Chris is welcomed. He smiles, nods, waves, every bit the seasoned star. There's a brief exchange of pleasantries. A joke. A laugh. The audience relaxes. But Joy doesn't. She tilts her head slightly, studying him, as if measuring not just his answers, but him. "So, Chris," she begins, her tone casual, but only on the surface. "You've played heroes, princes, and pretty much every charming guy Hollywood can dream up. But I have to ask, do you ever get tired of playing it safe?" There's a flicker, just a flicker, across Chris Pine's face. It's subtle. Most people wouldn't catch it. But it's there. He smiles, choosing his words carefully. "I wouldn't say I play it safe. I think every role has its own challenges." Joy leans in further. "Sure. But let's be honest, audiences see you as comfortable. Predictable, even." A ripple moves through the audience. Not loud, but noticeable. Chris shifts slightly in his seat now. Still composed. Still smiling. But the energy has changed. "Well," he replies, his voice calm but firmer now, "comfort doesn't mean lack of depth. Sometimes subtlety gets mistaken for simplicity." Joy raises an eyebrow. Or maybe it's just simplicity. A few gasps. A few awkward laughs. The co-hosts glance at each other. This wasn't in the script. Chris lets out a quiet breath. His fingers tap lightly against the armrest, once, twice. A grounding gesture. Inside, something is stirring. He's dealt with critics before. Headlines. Opinions. But there's something about being challenged like this, in real time, in front of a live audience. It hits differently. "You know," he says, leaning forward now, matching Joy's posture. "I think there's a difference between critique and assumption." Joy doesn't back down. If anything, she seems energized. "And I think actors sometimes hide behind that distinction," she shoots back. "It's easy to call something nuanced when it's just safe." The word hangs in the air. Safe. It lands heavier this time. The audience is completely still now. No laughter. No whispers. Just anticipation. Chris Pine's expression changes. Not dramatically, but enough. The warmth in his smile fades, replaced by something sharper. More focused. "Safe," he repeats, almost to himself. Then he looks directly at her. "You think it's safe to spend months building a character, putting pieces of yourself into something that millions of people will judge?" Joy crosses her arms slightly. "I think it's safe to stay within a certain image." Yes, there it is. Not just a critique of his work, but of him. The room tightens. One of the co-hosts tries to interject, a light comment meant to diffuse the tension, but it barely registers. The moment has already taken on a life of its own. Chris doesn't look away. "And what image is that?" he asks quietly. Joy doesn't hesitate. The charming, likable guy who never really risks being disliked. A murmur spreads through the audience now. Some nodding. Some shaking their heads. Chris leans back again, but this time it's different. Not retreating. Resetting. "You know what's interesting?" he says, his tone softer now, but more deliberate. "People love to talk about risk, until someone actually takes one." Joy tilts her head. "Are you saying you've taken risks we just haven't noticed?" "I'm saying," Chris replies, his gaze steady, "that maybe not everything needs to be loud to be meaningful." There's a pause. A long one. The kind that feels heavier than any argument. For a brief moment, it seems like the tension might dissolve. That maybe they'll pivot, laugh it off, move on. But Joy Behar isn't known for letting things go. So what you're really saying, she continues, her voice cutting through the silence, is that the audience just doesn't get it. And just like that, the spark becomes something bigger. Chris's jaw tightens slightly. Not anger, control. I'm saying, he replies, choosing each word with precision, that sometimes the conversation around art says more about the critic than the artist. The audience reacts instantly this time. A mix of oohs and scattered applause. Joy's eyes narrow, but there's a hint of a smile now. Not friendly. Competitive. Oh, so now I'm the subject? Chris doesn't flinch. You made yourself the subject when you turned a discussion into a judgment. The tension is no longer subtle. It's undeniable. The co-hosts shift uncomfortably. One of them laughs nervously, trying again to lighten the mood. But it's like trying to stop a storm with a paper umbrella. Joy leans back now, crossing her arms fully. Well, Chris, if you can't handle a little judgment, maybe live television isn't the place for you. That lands hard. A direct challenge. The audience goes silent again, waiting. Watching. Chris Pine exhales slowly. His expression settles into something calm, but resolute. I can handle judgment, he says. What I don't do is pretend it's something it's not. Joy raises an eyebrow. And what is it? Chris meets her gaze, unwavering. Personal. The word echoes. And in that moment, something shifts, not just between them, but in the entire room. Because this isn't just an interview anymore. It's a clash. Of perspectives. Of personalities. Of pride. And it's only just beginning. The silence doesn't break, it stretches. Not the kind of silence that fades awkwardly into a commercial break or a nervous laugh. No, this one lingers, thick and electric, pressing down on everyone in the room like an invisible weight. The cameras are still rolling. The audience is still watching. And now, every single person in that studio knows they're witnessing something that was never meant to happen. Chris Pine doesn't look away. Neither does Joy Behar. Two people. Two very different worlds. Locked in a moment neither of them is willing to surrender. One of the producers off-camera gestures urgently, subtle but desperate. Wrap it up. Shift the topic. Move on. But the energy at the table refuses to cooperate. Joy leans forward again, slower this time. More deliberate. Her voice lowers, but somehow it feels sharper, more pointed. Personal? She repeats, almost tasting the word. You think this is personal? Chris's response comes without hesitation. I think when someone reduces years of work to a label like safe, it stops being just about the work. A few members of the audience nod instinctively. Others exchange glances. You can almost feel opinions forming in real time, lines being drawn. Joy lets out a short laugh, but there's no humor in it. Oh, come on, she says, waving a hand dismissively. Actors get praised all the time. The minute someone offers a little pushback, suddenly it's personal. That's a bit convenient, don't you think? Chris tilts his head slightly, studying her. Not defensively, but carefully, like he's trying to understand where this is really coming from. You call it pushback, he replies, but there's a difference between challenging someone and boxing them into an idea you've already decided is true. Joy's lips press together for a moment. Not defeated, thinking. The co-host to her right jumps in quickly, sensing the rising tension. Okay, let's not get too serious here, she says with a bright smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Chris, you've got this new project coming out, and... Joy cuts her off. No, I want to stay here for a second, she says, not taking her eyes off Chris. Because this is interesting. The interruption lands like a dropped glass. The co-host freezes mid-sentence, then slowly leans back, surrendering the floor. And just like that, the spotlight tightens again. Chris exhales softly, almost amused, but there's a tension beneath it now, coiled and waiting. Interesting, he echoes. Yes, Joy continues. Because you're clearly taking this very seriously. And I'm trying to figure out why. Chris's gaze sharpens. Why wouldn't I? Joy shrugs. Because it's a conversation. It's television. It's not life or death. A pause. Chris leans forward again, his elbows resting lightly on the table now. His voice lowers, not louder but heavier. For you, maybe. That lands differently. Not aggressive. Not loud. But real. The audience shifts again, some leaning in, others sitting back, unsure. Joy studies him, her expression changing. Not softer, but more focused. Less performative. More direct. So help me understand, she says. Why does it matter this much to you? And for the first time since the tension began, something cracks, not in control, but in tone. Chris's voice loses a fraction of its polish. Just enough to feel human. Because, he says slowly, this isn't just a job. It's not just lines and costumes. It's years of trying to do something honest, something that connects. And when that gets reduced to safe, yeah, it matters. The room quiets in a different way now. Less shock. More attention. Joy doesn't interrupt. She listens, but her expression remains unreadable. And what if, she says after a moment, people just don't see it that way? Chris nods slightly. That's fair. Not everyone will. Then why push back, she asks. Why not just let it go? Chris pauses. And this time, the silence feels intentional. Measured. Because, he finally says, there's a difference between people not connecting with something and being told what it is without really looking at it. Joy leans back again, crossing her arms. There's a flicker of something in her eyes now, not concession, but recognition. You think I didn't look at it? Chris doesn't answer immediately. I think, he says carefully, you made a decision before the conversation even started. A sharp inhale from somewhere in the audience. Joy's eyebrows lift. That's a bold assumption. Chris gives a small shrug. Is it? The air tightens again, but now it's different. Less explosive. More precise. Like two people no longer reacting, but choosing every word with intention. Joy taps her fingers lightly on the table, her gaze drifting for a second before snapping back. You know what I think, she says. Chris doesn't respond. He just watches. I think you're used to being liked, Joy continues. And when someone doesn't play along with that, it throws you off. A ripple of murmurs spreads through the audience again. Chris lets out a quiet breath through his nose, half sigh, half restrained laugh. You think this is about being liked? Joy shrugs again. Isn't it? Chris shakes his head slowly. No, he says. It's about being understood. That lands harder than anything else he's said so far. Because it's not defensive. It's not sharp. It's honest. And for a brief moment, the tension shifts into something almost reflective. But only for a moment. Joy leans forward again, her voice steady. Then maybe the question is, are you communicating as clearly as you think you are? Chris's eyes narrow slightly, not in anger but in focus. Or maybe the question is, are you listening as openly as you think you are? The audience reacts again, louder this time. A mix of applause and surprised laughter. One of the co-hosts covers her mouth, eyes wide. Another shakes her head, smiling in disbelief. This isn't just an interview anymore. It's a standoff. And neither side is backing down. Joy smiles, but it's not a friendly smile. It's the kind that appears when someone realizes they're in a real debate, and they're enjoying it. Okay, she says. Now we're getting somewhere. Chris leans back slightly, his posture relaxing, but his gaze remains locked. Were we not before? Joy chuckles softly. Before, you were being diplomatic. And now, she says, tilting her head, you're being real. A beat. Chris considers that. Maybe, he says. Or maybe I just stopped trying to fit into what this conversation was supposed to be. That line hits. Hard. Because everyone in the room knows exactly what he means. The format, the expectations, the unspoken rules, and how completely they've just been broken. Joy's expression shifts again. This time, something closer to respect flickers beneath the surface. But she doesn't say it. Instead, she leans back, folding her hands on the table. Well, she says, if we're being real, let me ask you something else. Chris nods slightly. Go ahead. Joy holds his gaze. Do you think you've ever played it safe? The question hangs there, different now. Not an attack. A challenge. Chris doesn't answer right away. He looks down for a brief moment, then back up. And when he speaks, his voice is quieter, but somehow more powerful than before. Yes, he says. The audience reacts instantly, surprised murmurs, a few gasps. Joy's eyebrows lift slightly. She didn't expect that. Chris continues. Of course I have, he says. Everyone does. At some point. In some way. Joy leans forward, intrigued now. So then I'm not wrong. Chris shakes his head gently. No, he says. But you're not completely right either. A faint smile touches his lips, this time genuine, but edged with something deeper. Because the difference is, I know when I've done it. The room goes still again. And more importantly, he adds, I know when I haven't. Joy watches him closely, her expression unreadable. And which one is it now? She asks. Chris holds her gaze. And for a split second, The entire room seems to lean in with him. That, he says, depends on whether you're willing to see it. The tension doesn't explode this time. It settles. Heavy, unresolved, and somehow even more powerful. Because now it's not just about who's right. It's about who's willing to keep going. And something tells everyone watching. This isn't over yet. The air in the studio feels different now. Thinner somehow, like every breath has to push through something heavier than before. The lights still shine just as bright. The cameras still glide on their tracks. But the illusion of a routine daytime interview has completely unraveled. What's left is something raw, unscripted, uncomfortable, and impossible to look away from. Chris Pine sits still, but not passive. There's a grounded stillness to him now, like someone who has stepped fully into the moment and decided, consciously, not to retreat from it. Across from him, Joy Behar watches with the same intensity. But there's been a shift. The sharpness is still there, but now it's layered with curiosity and something else. Challenge. Not just of him, but of the moment itself. A producer's voice crackles faintly from somewhere off stage, barely audible, but urgent. Wrap it. Move on. Transition. One of the co-hosts straightens in her seat, clearly preparing to pivot again. All right, let's. Joy raises a hand without even looking at her. Not aggressive. Not dramatic. Just final. The co-host stops mid-sentence. And just like that, the moment continues. Chris notices it. The subtle power play. The decision to stay here instead of escaping into safer territory. He exhales slowly, almost as if acknowledging it. All right, Joy says, her voice calmer now, but more deliberate than ever. Let's take a step back. Chris nods slightly. Sure. You said something interesting, she continues. You said you know when you've played it safe, and when you haven't. Chris doesn't interrupt. He just listens. Joy leans forward, her elbows resting lightly on the table now, mirroring his earlier posture. So tell me, she says, her tone steady. What does that look like? What does not safe look like for you? There's no sarcasm in her voice this time. No edge. Just a question. And somehow, that makes it more intense. Chris takes a moment before answering. Not because he doesn't know, but because he's choosing how much to reveal. It looks like risk, he says finally. Not just in the roles you take, but in how you approach them. It's not always obvious. It's not always loud. But it's there. Joy nods slowly, considering. But if the audience doesn't see it, she says, does it count? The question lands like a stone in still water. Chris's eyes flicker. Not with irritation this time, but with something deeper. That depends, he replies. Are you doing it for the audience or for the truth of the work? A murmur ripples through the room again. Joy tilts her head. That sounds noble, but you're still making films for people to watch. Of course, Chris says. But that doesn't mean every choice is designed to be immediately understood. Joy leans back slightly, studying him again. So you're okay with being misunderstood? Chris pauses. This time longer. Because this question cuts closer. I'm okay with it happening, he says. I'm not okay with it being assumed. The distinction hangs in the air. Joy's fingers tap lightly against the table again, rhythmic, thoughtful. And what about perception? She asks. Because whether you like it or not, perception becomes reality. Especially in your world. Chris nods. I know. So if people perceive you as safe, Joy presses, isn't that something you have to own? Chris leans back slightly, his gaze drifting for a brief second. Not away from her, but inward. And when he looks back, something has shifted. Not defensive. Not guarded. Just honest. I think, he says slowly, there's a difference between owning something and accepting a version of yourself that doesn't feel true. The audience is completely still again. No reactions. No interruptions. Just listening. Joy's expression softens, but only slightly. And you feel that label isn't true. Chris gives a small shake of his head. I think it's incomplete. Joy raises an eyebrow. Incomplete how? Chris leans forward again, his voice quiet but firm. Because it ignores the parts that aren't easy to categorize. The risks that don't fit into a headline. The choices that don't scream for attention. A co-host nods almost involuntarily now, caught in the gravity of the exchange. Joy notices, but doesn't acknowledge it. Instead, she shifts again, her tone sharpening just a fraction. But isn't that part of the problem? She says. If the risk isn't visible, if the audience doesn't feel it, then what's the point? There it is. The core of it. Chris doesn't answer right away. He lets the question sit. Breathe. And then, The point, he says, is that not everything meaningful is immediately recognizable. Joy's lips press together, her eyes narrowing slightly. That sounds like a defense, she says. Chris shakes his head gently. No, he replies. It's a belief. A beat. And beliefs can be wrong, Joy counters. Chris nods. Absolutely. Another pause. But so can assumptions. The audience reacts again, this time louder. A mix of applause and quiet wow-s ripple through the room. The tension hasn't exploded. It's evolved, sharpened, refined into something almost philosophical, but still deeply personal. Joy leans back fully now, crossing her arms again, but her posture isn't closed. It's measured. You're good, she says, almost under her breath. Chris lets out a quiet, genuine laugh. I've had practice. A small ripple of laughter breaks through the tension, brief, but real. For a moment, it feels like the storm might finally pass. But then Joy speaks again. And yet, she says, her voice steady, here we are. Chris's smile fades slightly, not completely, but enough. Yeah, he says. Here we are. Joy uncrosses her arms, placing her hands flat on the table. Let me ask you something else, she says. Chris nods. Do you think this moment, she gestures subtly between them, is about your work or about your image? The question cuts deeper than anything before it. Because now it's not about roles or choices. It's about identity. Chris doesn't look away. I think, he says slowly, it started as one and became the other. Joy studies him carefully. And which one matters more? Chris exhales softly. Image fades, he says. Work stays. Joy tilts her head. Does it? Chris's eyes sharpen again. Yes, he says. Eventually. The conviction in his voice is quiet, but undeniable. Joy leans back again, considering. And in the meantime, she asks. Chris doesn't hesitate this time. In the meantime, he says, you deal with moments like this. A ripple of reaction spreads through the audience again, this time mixed with something new. Respect, tension, curiosity. Joy lets out a small breath, almost a laugh, but softer now. Well, she says, you're certainly dealing with it. Chris smiles faintly. So are you. A brief pause. And then, for the first time since this began, Joy smiles back. Not sharply, not challengingly, but genuinely. Just for a second. And then it's gone. Let me be clear, she says, her tone returning to neutral, but not cold. I'm not here to attack you. Chris nods. I didn't say you were. But I am here to question, she continues. And I'm here to answer, Chris replies. Another pause. Balanced. For the first time, it doesn't feel like a clash. It feels like something else. A conversation that went further than expected. Deeper than intended. But not entirely unwelcome. Still, the tension hasn't disappeared. It's just changed shape. Because both of them know. There's one more layer to this. One more edge that hasn't been fully explored. Joy glances briefly toward the cameras, toward the millions watching. Then back at Chris. One last thing, she says. Chris nods slowly. Joy leans forward again, her voice quieter now, but carrying across the entire room. Do you think, she says, this moment changes how people see you? The question hangs. Heavy. Final. And for the first time, Chris Pine doesn't answer immediately. Because this time, the answer isn't just about her. Or him. It's about everyone watching. And what they're about to decide. The question doesn't just hang in the air. It settles into every corner of the studio, pressing into the silence like a weight no one can ignore. Do you think this moment changes how people see you? Chris Pine doesn't answer right away. For the first time since this began, he looks away, not out of discomfort, but reflection. His gaze drifts past the table, past the bright studio lights, toward something unseen, or maybe toward the millions of eyes watching from the other side of the screen. Because this isn't just about a conversation anymore. It's about perception, legacy, control, and the illusion of it. Across from him, Joy Behar waits. Not interrupting, not pushing, just watching, curious now, not combative. The audience is completely still. You could hear a breath drop. Chris finally exhales. And when he speaks, his voice is quieter than it's been all morning. But somehow it carries further. I think, he begins slowly, moments like this don't change who you are. A pause. They reveal how people were already inclined to see you. A ripple moves through the audience, soft, thoughtful. Joy's eyes narrow slightly, not in disagreement, but in focus. So you think this just confirms something? she asks. Chris nods faintly. For some people, yeah. And for others, she presses. Chris glances at her, then back toward the audience. For others, maybe it complicates things. A small murmur. A few nods. Joy leans back, folding her hands in her lap now. Complicates, she repeats. That's an interesting word. Chris gives a small, almost tired smile. People aren't simple. Joy lets out a soft breath, half agreement, half contemplation. No, she says. They're not. For a moment, the tension dissolves into something quieter. Not resolved, but understood. And then, from somewhere in the audience, applause. It starts small. Just a few claps. Hesitant. But then it grows. Faster. Louder. Until the entire studio is filled with it. Not the polite applause from earlier. This is different. This is reaction. Real. Unfiltered. Some people are clapping for Chris. Some for Joy. Some for the sheer intensity of what they've just witnessed. Because this wasn't entertainment. It was something closer to truth. Joy glances toward the audience, then back at Chris, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Well, she says, raising her voice slightly over the applause, you definitely gave them something to think about. Chris nods once. So did you. The applause begins to settle, fading into a low hum of energy that still fills the room. One of the co-hosts finally steps in, her voice lighter, but still carrying the weight of what just happened. Okay, I think that might be one of the most intense conversations we've had at this table in a long time. A few laughs break out, relieved but genuine. Another co-host chimes in, shaking her head. I mean, I don't even know how to follow that. Joy smirks slightly. You don't. You just let it sit. Chris lets out a soft laugh. And just like that, the moment begins to loosen, slightly. But the impact? That's just beginning. Because while the conversation in the studio starts to shift, while producers finally signal the transition, while the cameras pull back and the segment wraps, outside that room, everything explodes. Clips hit social media within minutes. Titles flash across screens. Chris Pine shuts down Joy Behar live. Awkward clash on The View goes viral. Was Joy Behar too harsh, or was Chris Pine too defensive? The internet does what it always does. It divides. Some praise Chris for staying composed, for standing his ground without losing control. They call him articulate, grounded, real. Others side with Joy, arguing that she asked the questions no one else would, that she challenged the polished image and didn't back down. And then there are those caught in between, the ones who don't see a winner or a loser. Just a moment, a rare, unscripted moment where two people stopped performing and started confronting something real. Comment sections fill with debates. Joy was out of line. No, Chris couldn't handle criticism. He made a great point about nuance. She exposed something important. The clip gets shared, reposted, reanalyzed. Body language experts weigh in. Media outlets dissect every word. Even other celebrities start chiming in, some subtly, some directly. Because moments like this don't stay contained. They ripple. Back in the studio, though, the lights begin to dim slightly as the segment wraps. Chris stands, adjusting his jacket. There's no visible frustration. No lingering tension in his posture. Just calm. Joy stands as well, turning toward him. For a brief second, they face each other without the cameras pushing in. Without the pressure of performance. Just two people. Joy extends a hand. Chris looks at it, then takes it. A firm handshake. No words at first. Then Joy says quietly, "That was something." Chris nods. "Yeah, it was." A small pause. And then, almost unexpectedly, Joy adds, "You handled yourself well." Chris gives a faint smile. "So did you." It's not an apology. Not a victory. Just acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough. They step apart as producers move in, as assistants guide Chris toward the exit, as the next segment begins to take shape. But the energy of what just happened, it lingers. In the room, in the audience, and far beyond it. Because long after the cameras stop rolling, long after the headlines fade, moments like this stay with people. Not because they were loud, but because they were real. And now, it's your turn. What did you think of this intense clash between Chris Pine and Joy Behar? Was Chris right to push back? Or did Joy ask the questions that needed to be asked? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your take. And if you want more explosive, cinematic breakdowns of moments like this, don't forget to subscribe to Stage View. Hit that like button and stay tuned, because the next story, It might be even bigger.